Welcome back, friends. Thanks for being here. Today, we're going to get this Commodore 128 working. No idea what's wrong with it, but we're going to open her up and find out. Stick around. Oh, this thing. Those things. Thank you. Okay, so now we have the repaired 128 power supply plugged in, and we have the video capture software recording. Let's hit the on button and see what happens. This on button is super chunky, kind of stuck, so we'll have to get in there and clean that button up a bit. Alright, we got a black screen with a single white line down. Normally that would be off the screen on your CRT and you wouldn't see it at all. Quicksilver 128, 1986, Rob Chang. That is probably the BIOS chips that I showed you last time, and we are good to go. Nothing on the keyboard. I'm gonna bet that the keyboard's not even plugged in. A couple of sticky keys too. Okay, let's turn it off and flip the switch back here and see if that gives us a different ROM. Turn it back on. Black screen, a little bit of a flash, no signal again. The reset button again. Back to a black screen. Reset button again. Yep, I think that power switch needs to be cleaned. Switch back to the other ROM. Power switch on again. Hit the reset key. Screen's going crazy. Reset button again. Quicksilver 128, copyright 1986, Rob Chang. Commodore Basic 7.0, 122, 365 bytes free. Alright, let's open her up. Yep, I was right. The keyboard is not plugged in, so that answers that question. Let's get this heatsink out of the way. Alright, heatsink's out of the way. Sorry, RF shield. So I like this. This is my way of thinking. Either make them all the exact same screws, or make them so ridiculously different that you can't get it wrong. The power switch either doesn't want to move, or it wants to be touchy. So we will get some of our QD electronic cleaner. We will try and get in there and clean it up a bit. Is this thing free now? Yes, it is free now. And somebody's been into this machine before, because the bottom RF shield is also free. How's it look on the bottom? Oh, there's an interesting little bodge with a resistor on it. Another bodge wire over there. And looks like somebody's worked on the reset switch before. Give it another shot. And let's, oh, there we got a signal on the display now. And it's going again. And it's back again. Okay, so there is ground. And we have 5 volts on the cassette port. And 4.9 on the user port. There's the 7812 over here. Let's see what kind of power we have on that. .762, I think that's in. Yeah, we're not getting a whole heck of a lot on 12 volts. Alright, before we go too much farther, I'm going to pull the SID chip out. Just so we don't cause any damage to that one. I did not think that the 128 used a 6581, but that is a 6581. Okay, now that that pesky case is out of the way, I can zoom the camera in a little bit more for you guys. Let's check that on-off switch. And there's a solder bridge right there, although not all of the pins are used. So no connection, no connection, no connection. So it probably doesn't matter that there's a solder bridge between these last two, because I think it's just the switch that Commodore found. Turn the switch to the on position. No connection, no connection, no connection. Connection, no connection. So no connection there. I'm pretty sure we're supposed to get a connection between those two on that side. So let's reflow the solder on here. That's doing something weird. Okay. There's a whole lot of solder down there already. All right, that's working good. That's off. That's off. That's on. That's on. Okay, and while I'm at it, I'm going to touch up these reset pins also. Video cable, power cable, and we've got a signal right away. Awesome. Off, on, signal. That seems happier. Reset, seems happier. Okay, let's turn that off. Flip the ROM switch. Quicksilver 128 by Rob Chang again. 122365. One, two, 365. Let's turn it off. Flip the ROM switch. 12365. All right, it's a lot happier now that it's cleaner. It's booting up a lot faster. Let's check the voltages wherever my multimeter went off to. All right, so do we have input to the 7812? 23 volts output. 11.8. Output at the cartridge port. 5 volts. Five volts at the cassette port. 5 volts. All right. She's a lot happier now. Yep, boots up a lot faster. Let's put the SID back in. And this is a downward facing socket. And some of these are down and some of these are up. The 8502 goes up, the Z80 goes down. Alright, she's in. Let's see what we can do with a dead test cartridge. That was crisp. I have no idea if the sound will work on this capture card because this is the first time that I've done this. Alright, it's on. It usually takes a little bit longer to boot up with the dead test cartridge because it's checking out all the RAM chips. Okay, so the Commodore 64 dead test cartridge worked just great in the C128, but it only tested a third of what this thing can do. I'm going to have to get another dead test ROM and see what I can come up with on that. Looking around the board, I just want to clean it up a little bit, and then I want to get the keyboard cleaned, and then I want to get it back together and see where we go from there. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this big, huge solder blob here. So let's roll them. Okay, it looked like some part of the solder mask was coming up on that, so I'm going to keep cleaning and see what I can come up with. Okay, that was definitely part of the solder mask coming up on that board, so we cleaned as much of that big blob off. We got now a little tiny blob. Looks a little bit better. And we'll just make a note of that for the future. Let's do some more cleaning. Okay, that is Quicksilver C128 version 4 from 1986. We're going to dig into that in a future episode and see what we can come up with. Overall, pretty good. Let's get the keyboard disassembled and cleaned up. Sometimes it doesn't pay to put your tools away. I had to go back out to the garage to get the R-branded tips for the D-branded tool. And there's even less of a reason to use an impact driver, because these are coarse threaded screws going into plastic. I'm going to take this cover over to the kitchen sink and clean it up after I get done with the keyboard. There's a shift lock key and a caps lock key. That's just brilliant. Okay, and my keyboard tool. Okay, so I know you guys were all cringing when I put all the springs together, but honestly I would rather have them all together than lose a bunch of them all throughout the room. I'll sort it out later. Alright, let's go get this all cleaned up. And we're back. Let's get it all put back together. Okay, so you saw me fooling around with the LED connector. I finally decided to put some glue on it and go to bed. So it's in there now. Let's keep on getting this thing back together. In the reassembly of the keyboard, that no scroll key is a little higher than it should be because it's not as low as it should be. Let's get that back in there. There we go, that's better. The equals key is sticky, but it's the equals key cap because I put one of the cursor keys on and it works just fine. So I got to figure out what's going on with that, but that looks like something I can do afterwards. Let's pull it back up so it doesn't screw up our boot. And get her back in the frame. These locking keys have a single post that comes up and then they wrap the wire around it. So that was fun. That's what I was playing with on that. And these guys here. Get these screws in the bottom end because they look like they're going to be pretty easy to get in. And I'm just going to try and do it by hand because this is coarse thread screws into plastic. And this RF shield was never soldered onto the motherboard in the first place. So somebody may not have been into this machine on the backside to do some work. Or they may have been. Don't really know. And if you talk to Bill Hurd, or you hear any of his ramblings on YouTube or any other media outlets out there, he will tell you that the Commodore 128 was always going to be a desktop machine, and they had always planned on putting it inside of the 128D case, and that's where these two holes came in. They were always supposed to be there. We'll take the ROM switcher switch and tuck that back in somehow. And what that little switcher does is changes which one of these two ROMs is selected for boot. So this is the default Commodore ROM, the 31802 something -03, and then this is the Quicksilver 128 ROM. We'll get into that in a future video because that goes with that SFD 1001 drive. So we'll get that stuck back in there nice and square, and then we will find our screwdriver and screw these guys back in. Okay, So got to get the heat shield back on, and part of getting that back on is getting this thing here back on. This goes with the Quicksilver 128 ROM, which goes with the SFD 1001 drive, and this particular jumper connector goes on the 8th pin up on the right hand side of the main CPU, the 8502. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And as a point of reference, there's a little via right there on the main board. So we'll try and get that through on top of the heat shield, because that's going to be fun. And yes, I very carefully washed all of the heatsink compound off of the chips, but there's still plenty left on the back of the heat shield, and I will probably be in this machine in the not too distant future. Anyway. What I would like to do is get a set of heat sinks for this and get rid of this heat shield to make it easier to service. This heat shield was a product of 1980s FCC regulations. Okay, we are all set with that back in the case in a nice and pretty way. Pretty. This connects to one of the I/O pins on the processor, so if we were to connect it wrong, it wouldn't be that big of an idea, wouldn't be that big of a problem, it would just be a thing. So let's get the keyboard connected on and get her fired up again. Alright, I will consider it a success because we don't have any leftover pieces. Let's get the video capture set up and turn it back on. Okay, let's fire it up and see what happens. Woohoo! Alright, that was pretty cool. Man, that was a job, right? So we got it cleaned up, we got it put back together, a couple of cosmetic issues fixed, chased down some power issues, just turned out to be reflowing some solder. Overall, it was a cakewalk. The hardest thing was all those little tiny fiddly pieces with the keyboard. Took it all down to bits, cleaned it all up in the kitchen sink, put it all back together. Next time, more Commodore 128 stuff. Thanks for being awesome.